It's all look at Haaland, look at Foden, look at, Alvarez. He's doing the job for them, really.
One of the most consistent, one of the most versatile players in the Prem for a number of years now.
Probably perfect definition of underrated.
He's just not he's not that sexy footballer. He's never
can't be saying Kane and Watkins are in the same category.
This one, I think, deserves it because of the stick he got when he was signed. Seen as a laughing stock.
I think people think he is useless now.
Welcome to the Lost in Possession podcast. We're doing a little bit of a different episode today. We hope you enjoy it. Let's get straight into it. Reese, we'll come to you first. So, as I said before, the rules are simple. We pick 3 underrated Prem players each, but the rule is we have to pick one from each of our respective clubs. Reese, let's kick things off with your Arsenal player who you think is criminally underrated.
Yep, it's a difficult one because a lot of the Arsenal team are actually performing very well. A lot of factors to take into this account. I could have gone for some that I think a lot of people have said obvious, but I've actually gone for Trossard. I think he's been outstanding. I was sceptical when we signed him because I thought we should have gone for Mudryk. I thought he would have given us that edge, and I felt we weren't improving the team when we. But lo and behold, I'm actually been proven wrong. He seems to get important goals in important games. He's got a good attacking threat despite being on the wing. He's got 12 and 37 this season. In the league, well, in all competitions rather, plus a couple of assists, which isn't very high for a winger, but 12 goals for somebody as well that plays a lot on the bench. You can't knock it. He's been absolutely outstanding for us, and I think he's gone under the radar. There are a couple of others I could have mentioned, the Tomiyasus or Ben White, but I think people are realising how good Ben White is now. So yeah, I think Trossard's been exceptional. I think he's been critical for us, and I think he steps up at times when no one actually expects him to.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see him start more games to consider him underrated. Do you know what I mean? So, like, if the manager's not playing him week in, week out, is he actually that good? That would be my criticism of the Trossard pick. And obviously Martinelli, typically until maybe 1 or 2 games ago, he has been a go-to every single time without fail. Maybe we are seeing already that balance be shifted, but I'd like to see a bit more game time for him first before including him in this conversation personally.
But my counter argument to that is the team that actually starts all consistently, I wouldn't call any of them underrated. To be honest, I think they all do their job, and I think they've all got those expectations. I think none of us are too shocked that the starting 11 we have is that starting 11 with a player.
In terms of sort of what you're saying is underrated, Reese, do you think like the general sort of public don't think he's actually that good?
I'd think Ben White has now, people have realised it. I think Declan Rice for £100 million, we can't exactly say he's been underrated. We got exactly what we expected. Martinelli is still considered what you would call a wonder kid, so you can't really call that underrated. Tomiyasu probably I would say is underrated. Thomas Partey's not fit enough to play. Saliba and Gabriel have shown why they've got some of the best defensive partnerships we've ever seen. Raya probably gets a bit of stick, and Kirwar I think has just turned into form. So I think consistently, and who's been consistently good for us has been Trossard.
All right, Jamie, onto your Man City pick.
So my one, obviously, we've got some terrific players. So it's quite hard to pick, underrated ones. But I think one that is still underrated, even though people rate him, is Bernardo Silva. And the reason why I say it is mainly, and quite good evidence, is we were talking about world-class players last week. I said Bernardo Silva, and you, Jordan, went, I don't think he's in the world-class bracket. And to me, that just shows why he's underrated, because I think he absolutely is. And also the problem that a lot I see with, people doing combined 11s, including City players, he's the one who's always left out. And the people that they put in ahead of him sometimes are utterly ridiculous. So that's where I just don't see it. And I think he may not get the headlines that a De Bruyne does, that a Foden does, but his technical ability, everything like that, is just utterly brilliant, and he deserves more plaudits than what he gets. So that's why he's, I'd say, top underrated at City.
Yeah, it's a hard one with him because, as I said, like I'm not saying he's bad. Like he is beautiful to watch, the tricks, the turns. Like he has got it all. I think for me, and I said it at the time, the probably the reason he's not in the conversations is a bit more stats based because he has. I know he's played a bit of a deeper role at times for City, but he was originally supposed to be that kind of more attacking player, and his returns haven't been there. So I think that's why he's not got the plaudits he deserves. And obviously you'll know better than any around City team, but he's not getting the goals that Foden's getting. He's not getting the assists that De Bruyne is getting, obviously. And even like the comparison I'd make would be Gundogan. And Gundogan in that role a little bit deeper, not really attacking. He was so crucial to City's title win, particularly in the last couple of years and in that team, and he was stepping up and getting the goals. So that's why I think he has been so-called underrated, because the goals and assists numbers haven't been there compared to other players.
He's not up there with the sort of goals that Gundogan was scoring, that Foden is scoring this season, or De Bruyne. However, he does. It's sort of like one of the things of the eye test. If you watch him, you'll just go like, what a fabulous player he is. Okay, he's not getting the goals and the goals of the numbers, but he does get important goals as well. You've got to remember the 4-0 win over Real Madrid. He scored 2. The assist for the Champions League final was from a Bernardo Silva sort of cross. It was slightly deflected, but it still came from him. When we won the league for the sort of 98 points, when we're toe-to-toe with Liverpool, he was our best player. Now, we didn't get the goals that people sort of think of, but he was our best player that season. He's done, and in that same season, I think he won Portugal's player of the tournament when they won the Nations League. That's ahead of Ronaldo and all the PR he had in that. So there are some sort of, I know that might go against the underrated sort of performance when he's getting that plaudit, but I think other people just don't see it as much. And when I see all these combined 11s, him being out of it for 95% of them, I think is ridiculous. And I think he's one of the best technical players in the Premier League, and that's where I don't think people see it as much.
Yeah. Reece, any thoughts on Bernardo?
I have to agree with Jamie. I think it's criminal that people leave Bernardo Silva out. Look, when you look at, like, everyone seems to want fancy players, and they're like, oh, we won this because of this player. Man United was successful because they had Roy Keane. He wasn't a fancied player, got the job done. When Man City first got the takeover, Gareth Barry was their most important player. It's players like that drive success. It's never, yes, the players that score goals are the ones that score goals, but without a certain player in your midfield. Why was Vieira so important for Arsenal? He was the one that was, critical to that team. I think if you ask any coach or manager, players like Bernardo Silva are your dream. They get the job done and they're so consistent. This guy has played in every position under the pitch. And also, Pep has a policy: if you don't want to be here, don't be here. But he seems to have made sure that Bernardo Silva stayed. He's probably the one player he would fight to keep tooth and nail. He's a manager's dream. I think if you ask any manager, he's exactly who you want on your side. It's always the unfancied players that get the job done. And without them, you're not successful. City would not be where they are if it wasn't for Bernardo Silva. He's got the 3rd best key passes in the side behind Alvarez and Foden, which really does say a lot. He's got the best take-ons of anyone in the league because the ball just sticks to his foot. He's also defensively very, very good. He's the most defensive of the attacking team, even though he plays in attack. Like I said, he plays in every position possible on the pitch. You sometimes have to look beyond goals and assists and look at a contribution of a player. If you had 11 Bernardo Silvas in your team, you would win every competition every single year. He really is one in a million. Like I said, Pep has always seemed to make sure that he sticks around. He can let anyone else out the door but him.
Not helping my underrated comment that, but
He's underrated.
I'm not saying I don't think everyone thinks that, but yeah.
He doesn't get picked in these fantasy teams, or people, don't talk about how good he is. It's all, look at Haaland, look at Foden, look at, Alvarez. He's doing the job for them, really. He's picking up where that, they might be a little bit weak. So he is underrated. He's actually outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's probably a reason City are doing so good, right? Because they've got all the stars, they've got the Haalands, the Fodens, the De Bruynes, and then suddenly sitting there is Bernardo Silva, world class, not getting any plaudits. So says it all about the depth in City side. From absolute quality to maybe less quality, let's talk about Chelsea. So you're probably sitting there at the screen saying finding an underrated player in Chelsea's team this season is a challenge, and you may well be right. Certainly a lot of overrated players. But this guy, I think, starting to turn a lot of heads, particularly within the Chelsea fan base. But the reason I've included him is because I don't see any praise outside of Chelsea Twitter. So my pick for Chelsea is Malo Gusto. Now, genuinely, we've had an issue at Chelsea for several years now with Reece James being our right back, but having these consistent injury issues. And it's been on and off, as we all know now, for a number of seasons, and it has massively handicapped our success. And it's always been a talking point. Is James fit? Is James fit? But finally, for the first time in all these years, it's not a concern anymore, and it's not a talking point anymore because of Malo Gusto. Now, obviously, we all know, we're performing under par this season, but in terms of actual quality, Malo Gusto has been sensational, in my opinion. Again, it's one of these where maybe you have to put the stats aside, particularly how we've been this season, and just watch the bloke play. Like he's as quick. I don't want to compare him to Reece James because that's maybe a bit silly and a bit premature, but he's as quick as Reece James. Despite his small build, he has strength. Going forward, he's very, very good. He's got skill. He's got the touch. He's got the pace. He can actually cross a ball. It sounds so simple, but there's a lot of wing backs who can't actually cross a ball. And for me, he has been, again, maybe stats aside, but he has been a standout in this Chelsea team who have underperformed. And you look at his age and you look at how much we paid, and I'm genuinely excited about his future Chelsea career. 20 years old he is, 20 years old. And despite the money we've spent, we only paid 26 mil.
I think, to be fair, what's a testament to probably what you're saying with him underrated is you've not heard of complaints about missing Reece James. And he's been out for, 90% of the season, James. So, to be fair, that's a testament to him. And to be honest, he doesn't get the plaudits. And it probably is because you're doing crap. Sadly, if you don't do very well and you're not scoring goals, like Palmer's getting the plaudits because he's scoring goals. But without scoring them goals, you're not going to get plaudits for being in a defence that's conceding 2 to Sheffield United, conceding to 10-man Burnley. I don't know if he was starting in these or playing in these games, but that's the sort of, that's the outsider's perspective of Chelsea at the moment, is you're conceding too many goals. So how are we going to praise a defender of yours? So yeah, he definitely could be underrated in this. But the problem I think you've got is when Reece James is fit, when he's fit, if ever, what do you do with him then? Is he just stuck on the bench? And is that a waste of talent, or is he just possibly not good enough for the level that Chelsea want to be getting to? That's the sort of, I guess, the counter argument. Is he only looking good because you've had awful, I don't know about awful, but not good enough right back replacements for James, and he's just looking above average of them?
I know what you mean, and you're right. Yeah, we're not going to get praise for a defender when we're conceding, but he is good enough to start, regardless of Reece James. So when Reece James comes back and hopefully he's fully fit and can start playing, which, as we know, there's no guarantee of that anyway.
May last the game.
Exactly. And our reliance on Reece James now is way less of a concern. And in any big game, in any cup final right now, if Gusto starts, I have no issue with that whatsoever. And a lot of that is intangible stuff that you can't, right now contribute to stats. But if we start moving up the table, we have a better season next season. I think he'll then start to get all these praises. But yeah, if they're both fit, I don't know. Potter's got a problem.
I think, yeah, he doesn't offer the attacking prowess that James offers, but he is a good player, and I think Reece James will be sweating a bit because if he doesn't get fit, Chelsea know they don't need to panic to look for a replacement. So James could be out the door if the money comes in. He can play at left back as well, Gusto. Again, Chilwell's there. But if Cucurella will probably be sold, then you've already got someone who can take that slot. It's a weird situation because if they put Chilwell and James straight back in, his development goes straight back to square one if he's not playing. So as nice of a problem it is for Poch, he's got to make that choice. And if Chelsea, as we're to believe, might have to sell in the summer, in order to balance those books, it might have to be Chilwell or James that is sacrificed. But it's a hard thing for him because Gusto's been so good, but they can't. But he's not better than what they currently have in those two positions. But I would agree he is underrated. I think it's very, very hard to see what's going to happen with Gusto. At this moment in time, he deserves his first team place and he deserves to keep it.
Yeah, it's a tough one, but we'll see. We'll see what happens if James ever returns. Let's move on. So Reece, we'll come back to you. Give us your non-Arsenal pick, and then we'll debate each of ours from there.
Yep. So I've gone down the very unfancied route. I think you won't be surprised. I tend to have a preference of the type of player I want in my side. Before I go into detail about one of them, this one I think deserves it because of the stick he got when he was signed. Seen as a laughing stock, but people forget that this guy is captain of his national side for a reason. And I've gone for Liverpool's Endo. I can't really pronounce the first name, so I'm going to stick to just Endo for now. Everyone laughed when he was signed. Everyone thought it was just, because we couldn't get Bellingham, because they couldn't get, Lavio, because they couldn't get Saicedo. But he is the captain of his national side, and Japan are not a rubbish national side. Like I said, I think Liverpool are the team with the most captains in their starting 11. If they're not for a club, they tend to be an international level or a vice captain. He's been outstanding. He has filled the gap for Binho left easy and has offered probably even more. It's a shame he's come into the league around the age of 30, because if he was 5 years younger, we could be looking at an absolute monster here. But he's been outstanding, done everything for him, everything for Liverpool. He's proven the haters wrong. He gives you 110% every game with his work ethic. We can't knock it, and I really think he deserves all the praise that he's now starting to get.
To be fair, I think the criticism he got at the start was like you said, it's because they tried to bid for Caicedo, they tried to bid for Lavia, didn't get either of them, both went to Chelsea, and it does sound harsh, but it is slightly true. He was the last choice. They needed someone in that position. They had to buy someone, and it's probably due to his age, really. Maybe it probably had nothing to do with his level, but him being 30. Sort of, or I don't know how exactly old he is, but he's at least 30, is sort of, against what Liverpool probably wanted to buy because they wanted to buy someone younger. That's why they went for the other two. So when they failed to get them two, putting in huge bids for both, it's embarrassing that you've got to go with your third choice publicly, because behind closed doors you get stuff where, bids are rejected and stuff, but no one really hears about it. These were very public bids on both Lavia and Caicedo. So that's where his criticism is. However, I've not really heard a bad thing about him all season. I think other players are getting a bit more plaudits, so I definitely think he's in the underrated conversation completely.
Yeah, I'd agree. And look, if Liverpool go on and win the league, I think this will be a conversation that a lot more people are having. So I think that's a good pick. Jamie, let's move on. One from you.
Right, so mine is definitely one that I don't think people are going to like. He has taken so much hate every direction, no matter what he did. He did go for a big money move to United. It's Harry Maguire. I think people think he's useless now. And you've got to think of what his strengths have been are the ball in the box, he wins the header. And if you still watch him when they played Liverpool, I think he won 100% of his headers in that game. Every time the ball comes into the box for his header, he will win it. And that's his strength. His strength isn't, passing the ball round massively, playing these balls. He has made errors, and sort of that's why people are going to criticise him. But I think people think he's absolute dog shit, when the reality is he's a very good defender. He's just not world class. So that's where I think he gets an unfair criticism. But when you're signed for 80 million, he hasn't lived up to that hype. But I think people think he's worse than what he actually is. And I think he can still do a job. And that's why I said before in our England video, he is the other centre half with John Stones. And I don't think the other England defenders come close.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one because I kind of know what you mean. Like, he has been a bit of a scapegoat for this sort of banter era that United have been under. And I think a lot of it is slightly unfair, i.e. he's not the reason. But I do think he has also been terrible. And the problem is, for him, the reason he's the scapegoat is because of the money he cost, and just the consistent that period. I can't remember exactly how long, but probably 3-4 month period of just mistake after mistake after mistake, viral clip after viral clip. And I just don't think that helps. And that probably combined with the time that United were really suffering. But for me, I'd have to disagree that he's underrated. But I do agree with the fact that the level of criticism he got, I think, was unfair. So I don't think he's as bad as the criticism made out. And as you said, we all sat there and said,
that's my definition of underrated. If that makes sense.
He's somewhere in the middle.
I'm not saying like like I said, he's not world class or anything like that. But people think he is. People think he should be playing in the Championship. He should go back to Leicester in the Championship where they currently are. I know they're going to get promoted, but that sort of argument. And I think people don't realise he is still a very, very good defender. And if he went to West Ham, which was rumoured in the summer, I think he would have done a very good job for them. He's still a good Premiership player. That's where I think people don't rate him as highly as that.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't know if it's enough personally to call him underrated. Reece, where do you stand on this one?
I would say he's underrated. I think at the time when he signed, it obviously wasn't worth £80 million. And I think Chris Smalling was a better player. So I was a bit surprised that they let him go and really brought Maguire in. I think what happens is obviously Man United are a media hub. People will want to talk about and see him. So they see the 80 million and he comes in, and I think he joined a club when it was very disorganized. There's no lack of structure. The coach isn't necessarily good at defending. So it sounds like he was inevitably set up to fail. I look at, like I said, the situation, man, if he would have gone from Leicester to Liverpool under Klopp, for example, we'd be looking at a very different player. I think the players he's played alongside haven't helped him. They've either been injured or they've not been leaders. So he's had to pick up that burden quite a lot. He shouldn't have been the captain. I don't think he is the captain, but I think he's an outstanding professional. There's a reason why he was always being picked, despite the criticism, because he shows something. And I think he deserves credit for handling all this stick that he's been given. He's been dinged a laughing stock, and yet he's handled it well. His heading is fantastic. I think it's decent passing. Yes, he makes mistakes. Every player makes mistakes, and I think we all say they're glaring because the spotlight's always on him. Once it happens once and he does it again, you're going to notice it more. And I've seen more players make mistakes more than he has, and it goes unnoticed because they're not in that spotlight. So I think he's brilliant. I do think he's good, and I think there's a reason, like I said, he's picked all the time for England because he offers something that I think other centre backs don't. So he can't be knocked. I think he's still got a lot of his reputation to try and claw back, and I do hope that under this new ownership at United, that goes some way of doing that for him. Because I would hate to see him.
I don't personally. I put him underrated, but I don't. I hope they've continue to fail.
I thought you might not, but I never want to see a player fail. I never ever do, and I really hope that he does, come back in some way because he is a good player. I think he handles a lot of things well. Like I said, it's not all his fault, and I'm sure he would admit to his own mistakes as well when it's not been good enough. So deserves credit.
All right, let's move on. I'll chuck another one in the mix, and I think this one's going to be interesting. It's obvious, but it some people say he's not actually underrated. I've gone for Ollie Watkins. Now, he has become unquestionably one of the best strikers in the league. You look at the stats this season, I think he's one off Erling Haaland. He's got the most goal contributions in the league. And this isn't a surprise. This isn't a one-hit wonder now. Like, he's English. He's come in the Premier League, consistently performing, and the stats don't lie at the end of the day. And you want to quote FPL, currently the highest points tally in FPL as well, which obviously, as we know, factors in a few things, particularly those goal contributions. And why I'm saying he's underrated is I think it's almost similar of how it's been for England, because Kane's been there. Kane's world class. Kane's this. Kane's that. Kane hasn't won a trophy. Watkins hasn't won a trophy. But why are these guys not in the same category? That's kind of my argument to this. Like,
you can't be saying Kane and Watkins are in the same category of footballer.
The stats don't lie though. Like, he's up there. He's proving now for Aston Villa as well. You've got to bear in mind. Like,
yeah, who are performing at the Spurs level. Got to remember this.
I know.
This season, Watkins is performing very well. Like, there's no doubt about it. And I think if you said this last season, you'd have been absolutely right. But I think this season people have caught on to how good he is. But I think you've overstepped it by comparing him to Kane, because Kane was performing better stats in goals and assists than Watkins for pretty much, the fourth place in the Premier League in that sort of aspect. I think he's done brilliantly for Villa. You're not wrong on him being good, but I think people have caught on to the level he is at now, whereas last season people wouldn't have put him in that category at all. I think he is overlooked for England because people are going, well, what about Wilson? What about Tony? What about whoever? I can't think of any names. Probably, like, you can even throw in Bowen in that, because Bowen's been playing basically up front for West Ham. He should be ahead of those, especially after this season. But unfortunately, Kane is a world-class player just without any trophies. So that's where he's unlucky to be a player in this era with someone as good as Kane as a striker.
What I would throw in the mix as well is he's not been on pens. So he's got the most goal contributions in the league, one behind Haaland, and he's not been on pens. And I personally do think if he keeps up at this level, there is a conversation that needs to be had about Watkins. But fair enough. Reece, anything to add, or should we move on to your next pick?
I will say that Watkins is flying because he is a good player, but Unai Emery was going to get the best out of him. I said in our group chat at the time, he will have Watkins flying. He has that style of play that works. Aubameyang's an example. You put Watkins in Dortmund, he'll bang goals in. Okay, so it's no real shock that we have better players than him at our disposal. I like Watkins. I don't think he would be what Man City would be looking for. I don't think he's what Man United are looking for. I don't even think that Liverpool would look for him. I think they have a different type of centre forward in mind. And I think for us, he'd probably be a pick for us. but I also think we'd have different targets in mind. I think that's why he's overlooked. But I think he's a great player. Underrated, no. I think he's doing what I kind of expected him to do at Villa. So, but doesn't deserve to be criticised. He's doing well.
All right, let's crack on. Final round now of picks. Reece, back to you.
Yep, I think this one's going to surprise a few people. I think at 32 years old, just turned 33 if I'm not mistaken, people can say, how can you say that's underrated? But this guy has gone under the radar for so long. And if you ask a lot of fans at his current and former clubs, they'd say what a player he actually is. And I've gone for Wolves' Craig Dawson. Now, he is a threat from set pieces. He can pass the ball. He gives you a 7 out of 10 every game. There's never Craig Dawson's rubbish. Craig Dawson's done this. No one says anything about him. Why? Because he didn't do anything wrong. If you ask West Ham fans, they were devastated to let him go. Devastated. Because he always delivers. He is absolutely outstanding. Honestly, it's a shame he is 32 because I think we'd be putting him in the bracket of an absolute great. I think he would do a job at a top 6 club at the back if they wanted him. He would do a job. If a top 6 club should go and sign him in the summer. I remember when McAllister signed for Liverpool in the early 2000s. He was in his mid-30s. They love him up there. He was great. He really doesn't get the credit he deserves. I think if I'm not even mistaken, when he was at Rochdale, he scored 10 goals in 46 games. He's a centre-back. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. And he's been so critical for Wolves. He is one of the reasons Wolves are not in a relegation fight. You ask fans that, honestly, he is an absolute outstanding player. I honestly love him. He's old school. He's never going to put a foot wrong for you. So I've gone Craig Dawson. You can at me whatever you want, but I'm sure people listening to this will agree, especially if they are fans of, Wolves, West Ham, West Brom, Rochdale. They'll agree.
I don't hate it. I do. Yeah, it's one of them where I'm kind of thinking about it and I'm kind of like, yeah, you are kind of right. He's just he's not that sexy footballer. He's never had that praise, never had the title, never done anything that amazing, but has just low key been, I guess, a bit of a baller, really.
He's been playing at top level for a very, very long time, and he's still playing at a very high level. I think that's where he deserves so much credit. He's still playing at a high level.
Yeah, I don't mind that.
I think that's actually probably perfect definition of underrated, because no one, if you ask, who's this in defenders, no one will mention his name. He's completely under the radar of it. And I watched City play Wolves this year, and I'll be honest, not many people go into a physical battle with Haaland and come out on top, but he did that day. He absolutely did. So yeah, I think that's actually a perfect definition of someone underrated. I think like Jordan says, he doesn't get any plaudits. He's not a sexy footballer, and that's why he perfectly deserves to be on this list, I think. But yeah, good call.
Right, Jamie, your final pick.
My final pick. See, weirdly, I don't know what his best position is, but he's in the attack. But I think he can play on the left, right, and up front, and he could even play sort of that attacking mid role. And he's been brilliant for him. And I think only you see sort of some fans going, yeah, we miss him, but no one really talks about him in the same way of other players. I've got Jota for Liverpool, and when you've got their front players, you talk about Salah, you talk about Diaz, you talk about Darwin Núñez, and everyone seems to just forget about Jota. But he's one of the most clinical finishers in the league, which I think is quite surprising to see. But he also works completely, and I think he's a brilliant fit for Klopp in terms of the players who will run everything. They'll give you everything on the pitch. And like I mentioned, Bernardo Silva earlier on in the video, he does like that, where they're just like, I'm going to be running the most, or if not second most, kilometres on the pitch per 90 minutes every single week that he can. I think he goes under the radar because he picks up a few injuries. And unfortunately, like I said, at Liverpool, he's got the problem of Salah being the one who takes the plaudits. You've now got Nunes, who is, people love him or you hate him, but Liverpool fans will love him. He gets the plaudits. And Diaz, I think, pops up. I think he gets spoken about a bit more than Jota. But then even for his country, Jota, he's got Fernandes, he's got Bernardo, he's got Ronaldo, all at Portugal, and that's a big problem to his image that no one really sort of, notices him as much when he's such a workhorse and a brilliant footballer at the same time.
Yeah, I like this pick. He's definitely the least talked about Liverpool attacker for all the reasons you just mentioned. And again, if he starts in a big game, I mean, Liverpool fans correct me, but if he starts in a big game, you're not going, oh, why is he starting? You're happy. He's done it. He's done it away to Arsenal. I remember he's done it in big games. He's proven he can score in any type of game. He can do it off the bench. He can do it starting. He's a problem. So I think that's a great shout. And as you said, he's flexible. He can play in any position, well, any attacking position. I do think he's probably fairly underrated.
Carragher also said after the United game was, we missed Jota today, and if we had Jota in the side, we would have won that game. And I know it's sort of like Liverpool fans will appreciate him, but I think because he's not spoken about compared to the rest of them, the rest of the league fans just don't see him in the same category as how good he actually is.
Reece, where do you stand?
Yeah, I mean, I know I should disagree with some, but I can't really disagree with it. It's not me being secretly in love with Jamie. It's just he's picked good picks. Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I've always liked Diego Jota. I remember him, I believe it was at FC Porto. I quite liked him there. And I thought at Wolves, they got a right coup when they signed him. And you think, oh, is that going to be his level? But he's gone to Liverpool and he's done more than what I think people expected him to. I think, was it this season alone, he's on 14 out of 28? That's good. Bearing in mind he's injured for a lot. I think that's the thing that holds him back, is when he's injured, he's out for a long time. If he was consistently there, I don't think Darwin Núñez would have probably been signed by Klopp. He would have put faith in Diego Jota. But he is very good. He's a threat on the wing and up front, and he scores goals. His goal against Bournemouth in January, yes, we laughed that he assisted himself, but he did well to react to that. His reactions are great. His finishing is great. I remember he scored a goal against us, and it was a great finish. He pops up. If he's not getting you a winner, he's going to get you a goal anyway. I think his contribution is very, very good, and I think it's a shame he is one of those players that is injury prone, because otherwise we'd be putting him in very elite level brackets.
Yeah, I think that's a good shot. Right, let's finish off. Last but not least, and I do think I found the winner here. The most criminally underrated player currently in the Prem. He signed for this club in 2017 from a little German club called Ingolstadt. I might have butchered their name. For £3 million. He is Pascal Gross, or Gross, however you want to pronounce it. He is and has been, in my opinion, one of the most consistent, one of the most versatile players in the Prem for a number of years now. He literally has played left back, right back, centre mid, defensive mid, attacking mid. And I think he's genuinely done a good job in every single position he's played in. Every single manager, Brighton fans, correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty much every single manager you've had has played him week in, week out. He's never, someone with serious knowledge might correct me on this, but I don't think he's ever had a terrible game. Even if you look on who scored, his average ratings are just above a 7. He is the definition of a sort of 7 out of 10 every single week player who never really gets the plaudits, but is always a problem. So I think he's one of the most criminally underrated players. He's helped get Brighton into Europe. He's helped Brighton become a much bigger club than anyone thought they would. I think he's up there.
I think he's a really odd one. because I think if you ask football fans, you go, what do you think of him? And I think they go, you know what, he's an all right player. Like, so that's where I'm like, is he underrated or is he fairly rated? I think he's like in between them. Because let's be honest, he's not one of the best sort of centre mids. He's not one that's going to be talked about years later by anyone than Brighton fans. That sort of adds, I think, possibly to the underrated sort of argument. But yeah, he's fantastic and massively integral to how Brighton play and so important for them. I'm a bit torn whether I think he's underrated or fairly rated, because I don't think anyone has a bad word to say about him. And he's not so forgettable that if you mention sort of Brighton players, people will eventually say his name. So yeah, I'm a bit torn. Whether I think he's underrated or fairly rated, because I think he's a decent player, like I said, but he's also, I don't see him as outstanding. But that could be me underrating him.
Yeah, I think it's a good choice, actually. I mean, this is a guy who's been at Brighton since they've been in the Premier League, right? 2017. So he's probably, well, he is one of those examples of Tony Bloom's, scouting network. He is a very good player. I think he tops the most key passes in the league, which is testament to him. It shouldn't be a shock with Brighton's style of play. So I think he is very good, and I think he deserves a lot of credit. And I think at 32, it's a shame that he's probably not going to get that move. But he did make his German debut in 2023. So it goes to show it's never late. Germany as a whole, as a league, as a country of football, they seem to have those unfancied players. I'm trying to think of, I can't remember the guy at Cologne now, but he was in Division 2 playing for the German national team. So they like an unfancied player. And he's definitely one of them. I like him a lot. My concern is he better than if he left Brighton? I know that doesn't necessarily mean he's underrated, but why hasn't he moved now? Maybe he likes it. Maybe he loves, his chips on the south coast. I don't know, but I just think that surely someone else would have taken a fancy to him. I thought, he sounds like a player that's up Pep Street. Do you know what I mean? That sort of player he'll bring in, and even if he brings him off the bench, I just think is he just one of those players? He's not going to take you to where to go above that. If you put him in Villa's side, would he do the same job? I'm not sure. That's not being disrespectful to Gross. I think he is a great player, and I do think you've put in a good shout. But yeah, I think he does the job. He just doesn't get the plaudits. So I suppose you have to say he's underrated, don't you?
Yeah, 32 is probably why he's not got the big move now as well. Obviously came in, signed Brighton 2017. Guess a couple of years, maybe you could argue in those couple of years he could or should have been linked with the bigger side. But again, it's these guys that no one really talks about. They're the players who I guess fall into that category.
I think he's a player in the wrong era. You stick him in 20 years ago, wonderful. He's exactly what you want. I think he's one of those. He's just in the wrong time period. Maybe, I don't know.
I also think it's the sort of German part of it, not because of, it's the way sort of Germans are. They're sort of efficient, but not sort of sexy in the same way we were sort of saying before. Sort of, you've got to remember, like Gundogan, when he first joined City, people were criticising him because he was just doing the basics. He was giving you a 6.5, 7 out of 10 every week. He wasn't scoring at the start when he joined. And you see that with a few German players, I think, are just efficient at what they do, but they don't catch the headlines. And I know that might be stereotypical, but that is what you see from certain German players, though. There are obviously a few flair players, but you got to think of like Thomas Müller. There's nothing about Thomas Müller that's actually that exciting, but he is a terrific football player. So it's just, that's what I'm saying. There are examples where it goes against that, but there are quite a few that are like it, and that's what I think is probably possibly why he's not got this bigger move that you sort of mentioned.
Yeah, it's what I drew on earlier, didn't it? They pick those unfancied players get job done. It was Jonas Hector I was referencing to. This guy was playing in the second Bundesliga, Bundesliga Wein, I think it's pronounced, and he he was still playing for Germany. That's how much they love a player. Like, they don't base it off team, they base it off that sort of thing. You know, he was guaranteeing them a good performance every game, which is pretty impressive. And I think Gross falls into that category. But then you also say, if Hector loved playing for Cologne, but why didn't he ever move on to that next step, really? You know, and I think maybe Gross falls into that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. We have given you plenty of our underrated players in the Prem. As always, there's plenty to agree with, plenty to disagree with as well. But we want to hear from you. Make sure you're following us on all platforms. Get involved in the conversation. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.